In the middle of America is Iowa. In the middle of Iowa is Ankeny. And Ankeny is a 150-year-old achievement that few could ever have imagined. With no mountains, oceans, beaches, or forests, it was destined to be home to the workers, the farmers, the miners, the families, and the businesses that would not only feed the world, but also help save the world. Editor's notes. In 1938, Thornton Wilder gave the world a play about life in a small town. One of the most treasured pieces of literature, he wove stories of no significance into a Pulitzer Prize winner that has been a staple of theater ever since. Ankeny is our town, just as Grover's Corners was Mr. Wilder's Our Town. This production is meant to transport you through the founding of Ankeny 150 years ago to the sparkling jewel it is today.
In 1803, the territory that was to become Iowa was part of the Louisiana Purchase. 33 years later, after being explored by the Lewis and Clark expedition, the first settlers came to the territory. 10 years later, Iowa was named a state. Fort Des Moines, later shortened to just Des Moines, was destined to become Iowa's fastest-growing area, thanks to the river running through it and its central location between the Mississippi and Missouri rivers, plus a growing population of Dutch, Scandinavians, Czechs, Italians, and Germans that were looking for land and opportunities in agriculture, livestock, and coal mining. In 1875, hearing that a narrow-gauge railroad would be going to Ames from Des Moines, John Fletcher Ankeny, a businessman and investor in the railroad, platted an 80-acre piece of land just between Des Moines and Ames. 6 years later, in the area now called Uptown Ankeny, 7 houses, a Methodist church, depot, school, livery stable, rooming house, and a store with a post office served a population of 50. Mail and newspapers were delivered each Friday. 22 years later, in 1903, Ankeny was incorporated as a town, and by 1910 the population was 445. As telephone and electrical service was made available, the population leaped to 648 by 1920. During that time, Ankeny merchants helped serve the coal mining camps of Enterprise, Kearney, and Oralabor. Enterprise was the 23rd largest coal producer in the state, and Kearney had the most miners with 300 workers in the 350 feet deep mine. But the largest industry by far was agriculture, and planting, cultivating, and harvesting by hand with horses was a family and community affair. World War I affected the whole country for growth and movement. By 1920, with a population of 648 folks, Ankeny was able to get a public water system and sewer services, as well as a second rail line. Trips to Des Moines cost 33 cents. "50 years since its founding, Ankeny had grown to 650 and had a prosperous agriculture population and 3 coal mine communities contributing to the local economy. However, as the United States plunged into the Great Depression of the 30s, towns everywhere struggled for stability and stimulation from the government, businesses, and individuals. Ankeny was no different. And for Ankeny, the changes would be strong, far-reaching, and life-changing. The 1920s were a decade of carefree spirits and good times. But 1929 closed that period with a resounding crash. Americans in their homes, savings, and careers desperately tried to hang on for better days ahead. Then came the drought of the mid-30s. Life around the new town of Ankeny changed very little. Midwesterners were by nature conservative and self-reliant. They would read about and hear about the toughest times in big cities and were grateful to be in the Midwest, in central Iowa.
In 1941, as Europe struggled with the horrors of Adolf Hitler and his Nazis in World War II, President Franklin D. Roosevelt pledged to supply ammunition and hardware to the war effort. The mindset for most Americans was to remain neutral in what seemed to be a foreign issue. To supply those needs of our allies, ordnance plants went on overtime to supply bullets, tanks, rifles, and machine guns. With the war heating up, the military was forced to expand locations for bullet manufacturing plants. The Midwest was ideal for those locations, as they were far from the coast, easily secured, with plenty of open spaces. One of those open spaces was the west edge of Ankeny. And in June of 1941, 12 farmers were told to vacate immediately because a $53 million factory for ammunition would soon be sitting on those 2,445 acres. By November, where crops were growing in June, 171 buildings were constructed, and before December, the first bullets came off the line. A week later, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and America's commitment to the war effort was now a total national effort. Second Avenue was built, and it was the first two-lane, two-way highway in the state made to accommodate workers streaming to Ankeny from Des Moines and other areas. Des Moines water was brought in. 19,000 workers came daily into Ankeny for production that went 24 hours, 7 days a week. Ankeny had a population of 750. Some gave up rooms for workers. Others gave their front yards for tents and trailers. 60% of the workforce were women. They produced 8 million 30 and 50 caliber cartridges daily, shipping out 35 train car loads each day. In the 1,000 days in operation, Ankeny's ordnance plant produced 4 billion cartridges. Snowstorms and weather conditions added a challenge, and workers often had to stay the night to continue production. Besides the assembly line production jobs, there were 600 guards, 49 nurses, 5 doctors, and 8 clerks. Stories of encouraging notes to soldiers packed into ammunition boxes were legendary. Each bullet had the insignia DM on it. The inventory of those bullets from the 1940s is still being used today. The war in Europe ended on May 7, 1945. The Ankeny plant stayed in production until the surrender of Japan 4 months later. 9,200 workers were laid off from the plant. 2 years later, Deere & Company purchased 587 acres and 43 buildings and spent another $4 million to remodel the buildings. The federal government sold more than 1,400 acres to Iowa State University to use as a research farm. In 1969, Des Moines Area Community College was established, and 240 acres was purchased by the Board of Regents. Ankeny's population at the beginning of World War II was 779. By 1950, it had jumped to 1,229, and the hiring at John Deere had just begun. Now in the 50s, soldiers returned home from the war and the Korean conflict to find jobs and homes. Ankeny was soon to benefit from a nationwide transportation initiative by President Dwight Eisenhower. It would link Americans and their automobiles together like never before, expanding goods, cultures, and opportunities. One of the most fortunate small towns in the state of Iowa was getting set to be home to a coast-to-coast, border-to-border intersection at the front door. In those massive plans, in the middle of the country, were a pair of interstates with double lanes, one going north and south, the other pair going east and west. Interstate 35 was just a mile from Ankeny's town limits, and Interstate 80 was a bit further south. As traffic started flowing a few years later, so did visitors, trucks, industries, and folks looking for a small town setting to begin their lives and homes. From 1950 to 1960, Ankeny had doubled in size, from 1,200 to almost 3,000. A special comprehensive outlook for Ankeny in 1958 was put together by the City Council, It predicted that by 1965, Ankeny might be home to 2,500 folks. However, by 1965, Ankeny was approaching 6,000 residents. That same study predicted a futuristic 1990 census of 5,300. And in fact, in 1990, Ankeny was over 18,000. So, what was coming was a combination of swords of war to plowshares of agriculture at the Deer Plant, the intersection of interstates in Ankeny, and the entrepreneurial skills of three hometown giants.
The demographic studies, economic indicators, and Ankeny population predictions that were made in the 50s and 60s were ancient history on the days they came out. One of Ankeny's most impressive new assets was another offshoot of the land, just south of town, that was part of the ordnance plant. Some of the ground was John Deere. Iowa State University used some for an experimental farm. And now the Des Moines Area Community College began building classrooms and getting student interest, bringing a young population to study, socialize, buy products, and become part of the community. While that was going on, a young convenience store owner joined a friend who was in the same business, and they started corner stores for gas and snacks for the traveling public. Don Lamberti and his partner rapidly went from a couple of stores, buying some others, and started many more. Casey's General Stores was born. By 1983, Casey's was a publicly traded company and was introducing clean, quick stores all over the Midwest, selling gas, donuts, and homemade pizza. When the need for a larger warehouse and delivery system was needed, Casey's looked to Ankeny, and the rest is history. When factories, warehouses, and businesses looked for a Midwest location with easy access to the two interstates, one contact would always stand out. Starting out working in his family's Ankeny grocery store, Denny Elwell was now in the tire and automotive business and manufacturing running boards for vehicles. By 1986, he and his development company were pioneers and catalysts along Interstate 35 east of Ankeny. And the formula of location, quality of workers, and residential opportunities combined for steady growth in Ankeny for over 40 years. The growth of Ankeny's housing opportunities continued through the 80s and 90s. It then had a mega boost as hometown boy Dennis Albaugh took his agriculture skills to the world market and became a leader in the pesticide and fertilizer industry. In addition, his vision and entrepreneurial skills brought new neighborhoods to Ankeny. In 2006, after several successful neighborhood developments, Albaugh and the city unveiled a new city within a city called Prairie Trail. The 1,000-acre tract south of Ankeny sprouted up steadily on land that was once farmland and later the site of the government ordnance plant purchase, and now is the south border of one of the fastest-growing communities in the Midwest. Since 1975 and the Centennial celebration, Ankeny has had remarkable growth and progress, as well as blizzards and tornadoes. In 50 years, Ankeny has had thoughtful developers, builders, business owners, sports heroes, remarkable students, teachers, coaches, and families. Regardless of the population being 800, 8,000, or 80,000, Ankeny has retained and been proud of its small-town feel and unique character. So that is the story of Ankeny, the short and sweet version. This is the latest rendition of this history to be written, the first being Ankeny the First 100 Years, which was done 50 years ago for the 100-year centennial celebration. Then in 2001, the next version was printed and aptly entitled 25 Years Since the Centennial. And then in 2013, the Arcadia Publishing Company did a historical version with the cooperation of the Ankeny Historical Society called Images of America, Ankeny. Those books are available at the museum and online, and they make for fascinating reading. Hopefully the folks watching this in 2050 will agree. But first, here's a nugget of pure gold in a letter written in 1975 by much-loved community booster and Ankeny attorney Dick Herman. It is addressed to the Mayor, Council, and Sesquicentennial Committee of 2025. It was found this year in 2025 in a time capsule under the floor at City Hall. Although the original document is damaged by water, pests, and time, his message is interesting, heartfelt, and sincere. Dick died in 1989. His letter from 50 years ago reads, "By the time you read this, the writer of this letter will probably have passed away. At this time, there is in Ankeny a population of about 15,000 folks. We have 7 lawyers in the city, and the place keeps growing. I anticipate when this letter is read in 2025, the city will be 35,000 population and expect 21 lawyers. During the centennial festivities, we've had many things going on, among them a kangaroo court. I've been picked as the judge and have had a great time with it. So far, we've tried about 20 people for the purpose of fun and publicity. Even in the old days of 1975, people had a sense of humor. I fully expect in the year 2025, the nature of mankind will not differ in that respect. I hope, however, that by the year 2025, man will have solved some of the problems that exist today. I hope the selfishness and propensity to settle problems with violence and brute force is curbed to the extent that we have no more international wars. If not, this letter may never be read. I am 46 years old at the time of this letter. I've seen in my time a progress of technology from working with horses to cultivate and tend our farm fields, to tractors that can plow 60 to 80 acres a day. I've seen the airplane change from a small, crude craft to sophisticated jet planes. I cannot say what will happen by the year 2025, but expect if I could come back, I'd see the astounding advances. I'm sure you'll be using energy directly from the sun to power your homes and run your industry. I expect your political system will be a great deal different than what we have at this time, with you having less freedom than we have now, if for no other reason than an increase in population. I've been told only a fool would make predictions as I've done in this letter. Not wanting to be too big a fool, I will stop at this point and wish mankind the best." Signed, Richard D. Herman. What will the next 50 years bring to Ankeny? That's a great question, and will be a great adventure. Please be sure to record it with pictures and words, and pass it on to the viewers in 2075.
It is a fact that during our adult lives, the mention of a name, The tune of a song, the scent of a certain food can propel us into a twilight zone of memories where we can recall names, dates, and details just like they were yesterday. And more than likely, many of the yesterdays that we recall took place during those 13 years of 40-hour weeks, 40 weeks a year with the same group of memory makers known as the school year. There is a link, a bond, and a relationship developed during that time that is unlike any other. Those calendar turns that saw us double or triple in physical size, learn our own language plus one or two others, ultimately took us from milk and graham crackers to caps and gowns, all in plain view of scores of classmates. We knew more about you, saw more of you, and understood what made you tick more than anybody else. It was common knowledge who could and could not climb the rope to the ceiling of the gym, who could recite the states and their capitals, who would trade cinnamon rolls for a second bowl of chili. In fact, for many, those are the main topics of conversations at later reunions. Peace. Reunions. Why do we make this pilgrimage every year, every 5 years, or every 25 years? It was our need to check on, catch up on, to see and approve what has become of our classmates. A marriage, a doctorate, successful children, and a healthy mutual fund portfolio is important and mildly interesting. But keep in mind who really knows the truth about the past, what you did, who owes who a lunch punch, and who put the pepper in the classroom heap beds. Those are the things that make for outstanding reunion conversation. And that is precisely why there is such a thing as the Ankeny Alumni Association. Not to catch the Pepper Boys, but to give us all a chance to reminisce, remember, and repeat our experiences, memories, and fabrications to those who hopefully have a worse recall than you do. With Ankeny's humble beginnings in the early 1900s, graduating 11 students in 1922 to the 400-plus class sizes today, Ankeny schools have always had a certain pride, reputation, and personality all their own. Still seen as a very young and growing community, Ankeny is just now maturing to the point where it has established its own historical society and museum. It took Ankeny schools 75 years to graduate its 10,000 students. It will take a third that long to graduate the 20,000. Founded near coal mines and a railroad line, Ankeny's citizens and students have had to grow and mature without the benefit of the standard town square that anchored George Bailey in his wonderful life in Bedford Falls. Ankeny students have had to make do in grocery store parking lots, wide paved roads, and late-night eateries for learning the social graces. Despite this slight handicap, Ankeny has been able to establish itself in creating leaders and being a leader in school activities, studies, and involvement, a status that makes Ankeny the envy of districts nationwide. Ankeny now has over 20 city parks, 6 elementary schools, a middle school, a junior high, and a senior high, plus a first-in-the-nation tie-in between the YMCA and the high school. Young people leave Ankeny schools ready for life, education, and the world. So over 75 years, Ankeny has sent men and women into challenging businesses, advanced learning, and stable home lives, prepared through the experiences gained in our school system. No one person made this happen. No one time period determined the course of the school system. The successes and advances of the Ankeny education system have come about through thousands of you who have carved a niche for yourselves and paved the way for others to follow. Whether you were the homecoming king, the lead in the class play, a crossing guard in the 6th grade, or someone who helped an underclassman find his way to class, you were a role model that influenced others. Those times came and went. We all traveled the halls together, teasing some, tolerating others, but touching everyone. And this is what the Alumni Association is all about. Continuing that touching, encouraging classes to come back, to celebrate, and to congratulate for 13 years of hard work and continued lives of influence, for relationships that stood the test of time, and for lessons that we will pass on to our children about academics and friendships, reminders and reflections, things that matter and things that don't. Continue to embrace your past and support your Alumni Association's efforts to make a better and stronger organization so that the association can provide leadership, scholarships, and friendship for our classes of the future. The stronger that we make our roots to our past, the more beautiful we can make the flowers that come from the plantings of our educational system. Your school years made you what you are today, and they are continuing to influence your children and your grandchildren. help maintain the strong tradition of values and excellence that drives the Ankeny student day after day, year after year, generation after generation. Support your Ankeny Alumni Association.